Thanks, Dominic. And thank you all for being here. I hope this is going to be the most exciting, if not inspiring, session that you're going to attend at Signal today. My name is Megan Nesbitt. Like Dominic said, I'm our Director of Nonprofit Market Development. And that means I have one of the most enjoyable jobs in the world. I work with nonprofits all around the world, helping them use communications and technologies to further their mission. So we've heard a lot this morning about builders and how this shift in technology in moving platforms to the cloud and how that's allowing more disruptors into business. So we have completely new ways to get a taxi and to call a ride. There are new ways to reserve a room in somebody's home for you to stay in. We're seeing business disruption at a scale we haven't seen before, and that's largely because organizations and companies can enter market and they don't have to build servers and put them up in their businesses. They can use Amazon Web Services. They don't need to build a content management platform. They can use services like Box. This is fantastic when it comes to business innovation. But when you think about this in a nonprofit context, for nonprofits and charities whose sole purpose is to address some of the greatest challenges in the world, this creates a whole new dynamic. I've been in the nonprofit technology space since the early 2000s, and I can tell you there has never been a better time for people trying to solve social challenges and social problems. There's never been a better time to be a nonprofit, a builder of a better world, than there is today. There's a concept that nonprofits lag entirely behind for-profits and that they don't innovate on solutions as quickly as commercial companies. I've been in this long enough to know this is not true across the board. There are a tremendous number of nonprofit innovators. We have organizations that are operating essentially the same thing as an emergency ambulance dispatch in the Dominican Republic, where no 911 exists, and they're doing this purely by two-way SMS. When you don't have all the resources available, when there's not software off the shelf that you can buy to meet your specific need, and if you're trying to solve for some of the world's biggest problems, oftentimes there is no box software solution, you have to be creative. And this is what we see with organizations all around the world using Twilio. We're going to dive into two great examples today to give you completely different ideas on how different folks and different organizations are being really creative in how they're going about tackling the challenges they face. First, we're going to hear from Daniel Probert from CAMFED, and then we're going to hear from Max Little from the Parkinson's Voice Initiative. So without further ado, I'm going to have Daniel come up. CAMFED is a nonprofit organization dedicated to eradicating poverty in Africa through the education of girls. And turn it over to you, Daniel.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Let me try and swap. Okay. Okay, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Daniel Probert, and I have the pleasure of being Head of IT Innovation for an amazing organization. And I hope you'll all agree by the end of this how amazing they are. As Head of IT, I get to look at new and fun ways to use technology within our main countries of operation. So we are, as Megan explained, not-for-profit, fighting poverty and inequality by ensuring the most marginalized girls are enabled to attend school. And we work in Zimbabwe, Zambia, Malawi, Ghana and Tanzania. They're our main countries of operation. We've been running for about 23 years, and I'll throw a quick stat up because it always amazes me when I think about that. 2.5 million girls in that time. It's a phenomenal number to have achieved with such a small staff complement, and a lot of what has driven our success has been through our use of systems. From very early on, we've been recognized for embracing new technology and using technology to kind of stay a step ahead and learn from where our programs are working and where our programs aren't. And one of the key successes around that is, as an organization, everything we do is focusing on accounting to the girl that we're supporting. All our systems, all our operations, all of our community work that we do is focused around the individual girl. And so how do we achieve this? We're a Salesforce partner, I'm quite glad to say, and we do pretty much everything imaginable on Salesforce. It's the perfect platform for the way that we work because of how flexible it is. Now, one of the beauties of it is the fact that in the API world that we live in now, you can very quickly and easily integrate tools like Twilio into what you're doing and store masses of data. So I'm going to drill in on one particular use case that we have for Salesforce as a first kind of concept, and where Twilio came in and completed a loop within a platform that we were rolling out. So one of the keys to us is collecting information and data and communicating with our clients and our community support activists. We have a network of about 140,000 community activists that are working for us. We don't pay them. They go out there and they collect a lot of data for us and inform us on what's happening in the community so that we can learn from where our programs are working and where they're not. So around about 4 years ago, we were using a mobile platform that was becoming a bit too expensive for us and a bit inflexible for us to collect this data. I won't name it because it's not fair. And so we just gained a couple of very big, large amounts of money that saw our program jump from supporting around about 25 to 30,000 students a year to 120,000. Now, in an organization of our size, which at the time was 180 staff, that's quite a scary number to suddenly see an increase of. But we weren't scared, we weren't intimidated by it. We knew we had the systems, the processes, and the people in place to handle that scale. And amazingly, we did scale that year and change our systems by only adding maybe 5 or 6 staff to manage that entire process. And one of the key changes was our data collection system. So when we go out to the field, you've probably seen the paper surveys that people take around. There's a series of checkboxes and things like that. When you're supporting 120,000 students, trying to get that paper back into the office so that someone can scan it in, by the time that's been transmitted or passed along, it's just a tattered rag that you can barely get anything off of. So our mobile kind of platform that we decided to go for, we looked for open source because we didn't want to build something ourselves. We knew that the power of the community was there to support us. So we looked at a platform called ODK, which takes very simple XML forms, converts them into a readable format on Android, very low-cost Android phones, and enables you to go through very complex forms. We've pushed it to the very limit on what it can do, and we're now hitting points where some of the forms we've got, we're having to rework the forms and re-engineer it. And so we built a very simple platform that we published a form. The enumerators were informed via frontline SMS at the time. I'll get to Twilio. Frontline SMS is a simple message saying download your forms. They'd go in, they'd download their forms, submit data, and it'd come back into Salesforce. Hooray, we did that in about 3 months, and we're very proud that we'd managed to roll that out. But as you do with any product development, you go out into the community and you say, what's missing? What else can we do to make this better? And every single one of them said the same thing. Okay, it's fine, we're sending the data, but how do we know you've got it? How do we, and one of the failings on any systems we were looking back was that simple notification message back saying, got it, thanks. Which I know it sounds ludicrous in the world that we live in, but it was a simple message back. And this is where kind of, we did a bit of research, looked around different options, and Twilio came straight back in, directly out of Salesforce using the Twilio Salesforce SDK, and that was up and running in about 3 hours. That wasn't an intense form of development. We managed to get a very simple bit of Apex code up and running in 3 hours to fire back an SMS message to every single person that came in. So once again, we went back, we said, okay, we've done what you've asked, you've got a message coming back, what else is missing? And a few of them immediately flagged an issue that obviously we didn't see from where we were, that many of them were collecting all the forms and then going to a cell tower where they knew that they could get data connection and uploading hundreds of them all in one go. Immediately they would get hundreds of text messages coming back because we'd programmed it for each form to send back a message. And so then we started to tailor it to kind of provide more intelligent messaging back. So we'd send one back on the very first one, and then we'd wait to see if there were any more sent, and then at the end of the very last one coming in, if one didn't come in for 20 minutes, we'd send back another one. Then we started to develop it a little bit further to provide a bit more intelligence. If we were expecting certain things, we'd send certain results back. Are you sure that student wasn't there? We've got other data that says she was there. And so Twilio's made it much easier for us to communicate, as well as giving them the opportunity to send us a message back. And we have quite a few sophisticated now notification systems. If someone responds to the SMS, that gets flagged straight back to our women's empowerment leaders within the national offices to say, you've just received this message, please respond back. And all of this enables us to learn from our programs and, fundamentally, account back to the girl. So when we're talking to donors or we're talking to anyone about how our programs are going and why we know they're working, we have the evidence there to support it. And so I'll finish off with what other things we're doing with it. So we do the data collection. We have a very simple SMS app that we built just to send one-on-one SMSs. And then one of the biggest things was people were still using 2 or 3 different third-party SMS applications to communicate with our alumni network, which is great. I love the idea of sending those SMSs, but whenever we try and talk to people about how much communication goes into it, that data was always stored in this third-party application or just on someone's local mobile phone. So we built a very simple group application so they could build up groups of contacts, send out the SMSs, and that would all be stored on the actual person's contact record. So that when we want to run a report of who we've contacted or see a history of communication, as you always do when you're looking inside a CRM system, you could see all that information there. And I think to date we've sent about 180,000 SMSs using Twilio, which I'm quite proud of because it was a very quick project that we set up. And we're looking to move into donor engagement. So hopefully we're not going to be a spammy charity that sends out lots of messages. And our alumni engagement, I was very interested in the previous presentation because it's something that we're really looking into at the moment, how we can engage with our alumni a lot better. And that's it. If you want to find out more, visit CamFed. Sorry for throwing a donate bit on the end. It is back to school season and we do need help to ensure more girls can attend school, and your help would be great. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
That is excellent. It's amazing how sometimes those single messages going through, completing that loop, what an impact that can have. All right, so next up we have a completely different use case. For those of you who were in can I get a show of hands who was in the keynote presentation this morning? Oh, excellent, many of you. So the DUO award that went to Max Little, Parkinson's Voice Initiative. We have Dr. Max Little here to share what he's working on now.
Good. Great, okay. So, well, now there's estimated to be about 127,000 people in the UK who suffer from Parkinson's disease. I don't know if you want to put your hand up if you know somebody who does. Yeah, so it's a common experience to be to know about this disease. So I don't, of course, have to tell you how devastating a disease it is and how much it affects people and how important it is that we try to get towards some kind of cure, or at least a better way of managing it. And it's currently an incurable disease, and like many people, I'd like to be able to contribute towards finding a cure or helping people with it. A bit like my father-in-law, Jan Stripling here, who has it, and he used to be a ballet dancer, so it's very cruel that as a ballet dancer he's suffering from a disease which really affects his ability to be able to move. Now, if you get involved with Parkinson's disease research, you really want to know what's the state of the art in our medical understanding of it. And unfortunately, we don't really know what causes Parkinson's. The proximal cause is that there are particular neurons in the brain, in a particular area of the brain called the substantia nigra, and these particular dopamine-producing neurons gradually die. But saying that is a bit like saying, well, that's kind of like what happens. It's not really saying why it is that these neurons go on to die. So it's frustrating because we don't actually know what causes it, and it's also not obvious why one person gets it and someone else doesn't. And when you're faced with that kind of phenomena where you have some people get disease and others don't, the immediate place that people look to is genetics, because they say that your genetic variant is different from somebody else's, and so you're more likely to get it. But that hypothesis has been explored in great depth, and so far the evidence in that is pretty inconclusive, because genetics only explains some 5% of the variability about why you'll go on to get Parkinson's or not. So certainly there is some kind of influence of genetics, but so far only a very few genetic mutations have been discovered that actually are shown to increase the risk. So in that case, maybe it's just due to the phenotype, right? Because cells are all different, they express proteins in different quantities, and so over time, this protein differentiation causes you just by accident to eventually get the disease. It's like an aging process that's kind of accelerated. And there is some evidence of this. There's a, excuse me, there's a current protein called alpha-synuclein that people are focusing on a lot. This may cause a disease, but it may also be preventative. So again, it's not entirely conclusive that it's all just random variation. So if that's not the case, then maybe it's down to behavior. Maybe your lifestyle is sufficiently different from somebody else's and your lifestyle causes you to go on to get this disease. And we'd love to be able to have an answer to that question, but we don't. And the main reason why we don't have an answer to the question of, is it your behavior that causes Parkinson's, is because we simply don't have enough information to try to answer that question. Now, let me put that in context. We know, there are, the amount of genetic information we can collect about you is in the billions of bits of information. But the amount of behavioral information that we can collect in medical research usually comes down to information on a form. That's pretty much it. What you can fill out in a form is pretty much all we can find out about your behavior in medical research. So it's really not been possible to go about measuring behavior objectively using anything other than survey. So it must then be that we have to look at the environmental effects. Yes, we have to say, well, maybe it's all just due to, or maybe there's an environmental factor. You live in a particular place, but we have the same problem with environmental statistics, in that we simply don't know enough about you or about where you live in order to be able to be conclusive about that. So the best information we have is surveys, and they just don't tell us enough at all. So we have to really be able to look at genes, the phenotype, behavior, and environment all together in order to be able to understand this disease properly. Now, when you set this kind of task, we're thinking about something like the Framingham Heart Study, where with a disease like Parkinson's, you could actually, many of you are, it depends on your age, but if you're, say, in your 40s or 50s, the things that are causing the disease could already be causing it in you now, but you wouldn't know it, right? So, but you go on to develop the symptoms in your late 60s or early 70s. So there's a period of time in which we need to know a lot about what's going on with your behavior. You need to know all this information but continuously from about the age that you're 40 to about the age that you start to develop the symptoms. That's in your 60s. That's what we need to do. Now, that is a hugely tall order, of course, you can imagine, because you've got to follow a lot of people, because only about 100 in 100,000 people will go on to develop the disease. And we don't know who's going to get it. So we have to follow a huge number of people. So actually, to make that possible, the whole process of doing these measurements has got to be ridiculously inexpensive. It's also got to capture vast amounts of information, and it's got to capture it continuously. Now, I want to suggest to you that actually we're living in a rather miraculous time, and I think the technologies that are now available are starting to give us a real glimmer of hope that this may indeed be possible. And I want to give you some idea about how we're going about using ubiquitous data collection technologies in order to try to make our first bite into this enormous problem. So our approach is to think about this quite from a lateral point of view. What we want to do is we want to adapt whatever measurement technology is basically ubiquitous to everyone in the room right now. We don't want to wait for some miraculous technology to be developed in the future. We have to work with what we've got right now, because that's the only way to start making progress, because we can't wait for a cure, clearly. So what this means to me, when measuring behavior, is things like commodity smartphones, the telephone, an internet-connected PC, or an open-source web server. So basically, whatever we can get our hands on in order to be able to collect objective behavior about objective data about behavior. So we can use things like Android smartphones or Apache web servers, and indeed this is this important role that Twilio has played in our research, where we can collect voice-based recordings of people's behavior using just a telephone. Because the telephone is ubiquitous, everyone has one. And of course, if you're elderly, then a smartphone is a nice bit of technology, but not something that you're going to be able to use without some training, but he'll know how to use a telephone. So a telephone is a very good way of getting vocal behavior information. And this allows us to run really highly accessible clinical trials. That is, trials which are simple enough that anyone with little to no training can actually participate. Now, this is another problem, of course. I said that we need to at least look at, potentially up to 1 million people in order to be able to get sufficient numbers that we can actually know that so there's the thousands of people that we're going to find who will actually get Parkinson's out of the 1 million or so that we're going to recruit into a trial. Now, recruiting 1 million people into a trial is normally considered to be impossible, because typically the cost of recruiting people into clinical trials will run to something like $10,000 per person. So that gives you an idea about how expensive classical trials really are. But an example of this is the Parkinson's Voice Initiative, where we recruited nearly 17,000 participants, but using voice-based IVR systems, and 17,000 participants in under 6 months, and we were able to record their vocal behavior for the whole project itself cost under $1,000 to run. So that gives you some idea about how much cheaper it can be to use these kind of emerging technologies. And just other examples of that, we reached out to a patient community called Patients Like Me. They mobilized their Parkinson's community to call up a telephone number provided by Twilio to leave vocal behavior recordings, which we could then correlate to clinical data that was left on through their website. With the support of Apple, we were able to participate in launching a bit of software called Research Kit. And this aims to be a standardized platform for iPhone-based, mass-market, smartphone-based clinical research. And to give you some ideas about the kind of recruitment that you can get this way, so there are 5 apps that were launched in the iTunes store, and they recruited tens of thousands of trial participants in a matter of days across several diseases, including Parkinson's. And the final piece of the puzzle really is about scientific knowledge. As individual researchers, we can bring one particular perspective to a very difficult problem like this, understanding an intractable disease like Parkinson's. But relying on one perspective alone is not enough. So we're working with organizations like Sage Bionetworks in Seattle, which is a crowdsourced scientific research platform. And the idea with that is that we can share our data freely with other researchers who can then contribute their own scientific analysis to this kind of data. So being able to share data like this is clearly extremely important. So I'll end on this point that I hope I've convinced you that the kind of technologies that are at our disposal, including technologies like Twilio, when they're combined together, can be extraordinarily effective at lowering the costs of very comprehensive clinical trials where things like behavioural measurements are absolutely key. Thanks very much.